So the Mishnah states that the bitter waters or the curse-making waters, bitter waters are hamaim hamarim, the bitter waters, and there's a pun on maim mu'ararim, the curse-making waters. And these waters are sometimes described one way, sometimes they're marim, and sometimes they're mu'ararim. Sometimes they're bitter, and sometimes they're curse-making. And we can see the pun here. But sometimes they don't work. So what is described in Torah as a fidelity test sometimes doesn't work. And the Mishnah says, look, in theory, if she's not been faithful, then her eyes burst out and her skin turns green and her veins pop out, and this happens instantly. But if she has merit, then the punishment is delayed. I guess from one point of view, you could say, well, that's a really interesting commentary, of course, on the power of positive mitzvot. But anyway, that's the view of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Shimon is going to disagree. In the fifth Mishnah of the third chapter, Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ein zechut tola b'mayim ha'ma'ararim. The merit does not suspend the effect of the Ma'im HaMu'ararim, the curse-making waters. He doesn't agree. Rabbi Shimon is actually more or less, he's an early authority. He's more or less from the time of the Beit Mikdash. Remember, we said that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's the bridge, the authority that bridges the world of the temple to the world of the rabbinic Judaism. He's the one who's carried out from Jerusalem in a coffin and establishes, rabbinic Judaism in Yavne. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai suspends the ritual of the Sotah because he says the men are no longer faithful. So clearly, when he's alive, there's something. Clearly it's not working. Clearly it's not working when he's alive. Rabbi Shimon has a different memory. So for Rabbi Shimon, it's still working. Merit doesn't suspend the effect of the water. They work straight away. And he gives his reasoning that if you say that merit does suspend the effect of the curse-making waters, you weaken, or the word mather can mean to weaken. It can mean to make dim. If a light is burning a bit dim, it's mather. Somehow you weaken, you tarnish. It's translated by Danby as tarnish. You somehow degrade. You degrade the water, you weaken the water. In the case of all the women who drink it. Umotzi ata shem ra al hatorot sheshatu. And you basically defame the pure women who drank it. Because everyone will say, oh yeah, they were defiled, but their merit suspended the effect. And remember, we said at the very beginning of the tractate that, the rabbis must have known that physically these curse-making waters don't have any effect. And one way of looking at it, one positive way of reframing this whole tractate, is that this is a way of actually restoring marital harmony in a situation where there's a jealous husband. There's a test which we know will have no impact. From a logical point of view, we know it has no impact on the health of the wife. And yet, once the test has been carried out, she's proved to be innocent. Now, this is such a humiliating and degrading test that it's difficult to see the tractate in that framing, but we could see it in that framing. And if we did, then Rabbi Shimon's words are absolutely on point. He's saying, look, if you don't believe in the test, then everybody will slander pure women who've drunk the waters and who've survived. Rebbe treads halfway. Rebbe Omer, Rebbe says, look, merit does suspend the effect. She doesn't bear a child. She doesn't thrive. She doesn't look, shevach is praise. She doesn't look praiseworthy. She doesn't look good. Rebbe, remember, is teaching now 200 years. 150 years after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai suspended this process. So Rebbe's remembering 150 years later. So maybe he's trying to do some kind of compromise here. So he's saying merit does suspend the effect, but she doesn't get pregnant. She doesn't thrive. Eile shemit navna v'holechet. She wastes away. She just gradually wastes away. V'sofa shehi meta ba'ota mita, and finally dies through that death. So Rebbe is rational, but he's not happy. We can't be happy learning Rebbe, and we can't be happy learning Rebbe. If you don't mind, let me. I mean, this is a difficult tractate. I think we can't get away from the fact this is a difficult tractate. Let me go on. Nitamat minchata ad shelo kadsha. What if, rather than talking about the purity of the wife, we start talking about the purity of the meal offering? So maybe, for example, something happened to the meal offering, but before it was put in the ministering vessel. So we learned already that the offering is brought in this Egyptian basket. Egypt has all kinds of negative connotations, and then it's transferred from the basket into a ministering vessel, and then it's brought to the altar. So the question the Mishnah is going to ask is, well, I mean, clearly the Mishnah has his mind on questions of Tumah and Tahara, questions of purity and holiness. So Mishnah is going to ask, well, what happens to the offering if it's defiled before it's put in the ministering vessel? And it answers, it's like all meal offerings, we can redeem it. So we can exchange money for the meal offering. The meal offering is then no longer holy. And then we can bring another meal offering. And that's the rule for all offerings, if they become unfit in some way. But after it's been put in the ministering vessel, at that point, we can't redeem it anymore. It's consecrated. And it's the same rule. It's like all meal offerings, but in this case, the rule is it has to be burnt. Tisaref. Again, I don't know whether there's a mental process going on that's parallel to the tragic fate of this woman. We remember that yesterday we learned that in the Gemara on the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says that it's better to burn words of Torah rather than teaching them to women. Whether he's got this Mishnah in his head, I don't know. But anyway, the meal offering is going to be burnt. And there's a whole list of situations in which we burn the meal offering. Kaufman has Eila. This should probably be Eilu, these. I've translated it as these. Kaufman has Eila, but. Anyway, either but or these. Either but or these are the meal offer. These are those whose meal offerings are burnt. Eila she minchotehem nisrafot. These are those whose meal offerings are burnt. Interestingly, minchotehem is with the masculine here. So again, Kaufman, the scribe on Kaufman, seems a bit unreliable at this point. But anyway, we know we have a list. And this list is very similar, actually, to a list that we came across in the first chapter of Sotah. We learned that a certain number of women are prohibited from eating truma. And these are women whose status is known. So the ritual has got no purpose. The purpose of the ritual is to decide a case of uncertainty. And there are certain people whose state is known. So someone who says, Tamei ani lach, I'm unclean to you, or witnesses came to say, or one who says, I won't drink, or one who says a husband doesn't want to make a drink. All of these are permitted to eat truma because they're in a kind of in-between state. These are the situations where their husband will eventually give them a get. They'll give them a divorce. And we're going to go through the same list in our Mishnah in the 3rd chapter. So we've now got right to the point where she's about to drink. The meal offering has been brought in the basket. It's been transferred to the ministering vessel. And then what happens? So at this point, she says, I'm defiled. But or maybe witnesses came and said she'd been defiled. Maybe she says, I refuse to drink. Maybe her husband says, I refuse to make her drink. This is a really interesting last case. Someone whose husband had a relationship with her on the way. We learned that in this peculiar in-between stage, they can't have a sexual relationship on the way. So it sounds like they did. And it sounds like the news is that maybe the husband confesses to this right at the last second. So the meal offering is already in the ministering vessel. And he says, oh, yeah, no, but this happened on the way. And then the Mishnah adds, V'chol hanesuot la kohanim. And the meal offerings of all women married to priests. V'chol hanesuot la kohanim minchotehem nisrafot. The meal offerings of all women married to priests are burnt. Now we have a general halacha. It's a verse in Vayikra. V'chol minchat kohen kalil tieh lo teachel. Every meal offering of the priest shall be wholly burnt. It can't be eaten. Whereas this meal offering, we know that a handful is going to be burnt and the rest is going to be eaten by the priests. Well, the meal offering of the wife of a priest is not exactly a priestly offering. So it's not going to be burnt on the altar, but it's going to be burnt, if you like, on the pile of ashes. It's going to be disposed of because it can't be offered on the altar completely, and yet it can't be eaten. So it's going to be disposed of by burning with the rest of the ashes.